Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. So today's webinar, the purpose of this, we're going to be giving you guys a little bit more information on the upcoming workload study, and specifically going through the tools that allow you guys to document your activities throughout the course of the study. All right. The webinar today, primarily, you're going to be hearing from Dr. Nathan Lowe. He is the Program Director for the Grants and Research Team here at APPA. My name is Megan Foster. I'm a Program Analyst. I will be fielding some of your questions along with Travis Johnson, who is also here. Okay. Just a couple of things before we get started. Your microphone should be on mute already. Please do not take them off of mute for any reason throughout the webinar. It causes a little too much background noise, and it makes it hard for everyone to hear what we're saying. We're really open to questions, so throughout the webinar, if you have questions, please submit them in the question box. Travis will be fielding those throughout. If they're easy to answer, we'll answer them immediately. We'll also have an open question time at the end of the webinar. We ask that during that time, you guys use the chat function so that everyone can see your questions and that can be answered in real time for everyone. The current webinar will also be recorded, and that will be distributed to all of you after today if you need to refer to it for any reason.
Okay, great. Thanks, Megan. Again, my name is Nathan Lowe, and I'm going to be walking you through how to complete step-by-step instructions to document any activity that you complete during the time study itself. So a few things before we get going, and we'll reiterate this a few different times, but immediately later this week, preferably by tomorrow, we will send a recording of this session to each study participant along with their respective study ID, which we'll talk about in a moment, and so, what we're calling a reference guide, which is a PDF document outlining the same steps that we are discussing today, as well as a glossary of all the activities. And so look for that to come hopefully by tomorrow, certainly Friday by the latest. And something that I've talked with the DLC leadership about is after this training session, you will be provided access to this form, and so that you can go ahead and begin familiarizing yourself with it, practicing, going through it, and that'll give you at least a week, if not a little bit longer than a week, to practice using the form before we begin actually with the time study on October 21st. So again, we'll repeat these items a few times during today's session, but I just want to go ahead and acknowledge those things at this moment. So hopefully all of you are familiar with the Google platform system. Our understanding in talking with the DOC leadership and advisory committee that we've been working with over the last several months is that you are, and so this Google Forms is something that you'll be using to document the details of activities that you spend during the time study. So given the fact that the actual website address of the Google form or the time study form was pretty long, we were able to condense it down using the tiny URL address that you see on this screen. Again, this address, this link will be provided to you in various forms for you to be able to easily access it. But each time that you access it, it will obviously, you'll come to this screen just to acknowledge that you have, this is where you start, and you simply just click next to start completing the form. So we'll do that now. So this next page you'll see is simply asking you to document information, one about yourself, and then most notably the date in which the activity was completed. Not necessarily the date that you're documenting the details of the activity, but the date in which the activity was completed. and that'll be the timestamp that we'll know for when you are completing this information. And as I mentioned a moment ago, each individual participant will receive their own unique study ID number. It'll be a 3-digit number, and we will send that individually to each of you. Please keep this number confidential. It protects your anonymity, and the only people that will know your study ID number are you and us, the research team. No other DOC official will have knowledge of that. So basically, the reason doing that is, again, to protect your anonymity and to ensure that you're providing honest and accurate information without any concern of that information being shared with your identity in any way. So, and as we report the information in the end, we will not even use study IDs, but essentially look at those in terms of job title, positions, and present the findings in that way. So again, once you receive your study ID, please do not share it with anyone. Keep that confidential. And each time that you complete this form, you will enter, again, that 3-digit study ID number. So once you've entered those 2 pieces of information, you will, you will move on, proceed to the next section, which is the activities list. Now here at the top, you'll see only one activity should be checked for each event that a time study sheet is completed. And so actually you'll only be limited to click on one of the activities each time you complete this form. So the whole idea behind completing this study is for you all as a department to get a good understanding of the time it takes to complete each individual activity, not an event that may involve multiple activities. So our individual data level of analysis is at the activity level, okay? So I just want to reiterate that. You'll only be limited to check one activity each time you complete this form, okay? Now, with that being said, there's going to be some activities that involve groups of offenders. So far, I believe 3, maybe 4 activities, which we'll acknowledge here. One you can see on the screen in front of you. It states cognitive thinking. And it states if that is an activity that you complete with a group of offenders, certainly more than one, then you will not need to provide an individual offender DOC number when you document the details of that, okay? Otherwise, so in that case, if the activity did not pertain to an individual offender, then you would just type NA at the top. However, obviously, if it did involve, if the activity did involve an individual offender, then you would put that individual's DOC ID number, okay? So you'll also note that on the right-hand side of your screen that the activities, there are a total of 53 individual activities across 4 different categories. Those categories there are case-specific, which comprise the most activities, managerial supervisory, so those obviously pertain for those particular type of staff, clerical, which involve more administrative and clerical duties, which not only could support staff do, but other staff, managerial, and agents, line agents could complete as well. So those could cross different job titles. And then there's a handful of activities under the professional development and community category. Okay. Something I want to also note is, and let me go ahead and pull up all of the activities. So here on this screen, you'll see all 29 case-specific activities. And don't get caught up right now in how all of these different activities are defined. Again, this week we'll be providing you with a document that provides a glossary that defines all 53 individual activities. And so it'll be very important for you to read through that information so you understand exactly which what each activity means in terms of this study. One I really want to acknowledge and bring to your attention though right now is number 6 there, contact. That may be the most frequent activity that you document during this 5-week period of the time study. And I say that because, as you'll see once you receive the documentation, that contact is defined as contact with, an offender, maybe a group of offenders, or other key stakeholders involved in the completion of your day-to-day, week-to-week job responsibilities. So it could be a judge, could be an attorney, could be another agent or DOC employee, but that contact, the interaction with another person is how we're defining that particular activity. So that is one that you'll probably use quite a bit. The next, and then here on this slide, you'll see the remaining activities across the 3 different categories. Note there on the managerial and supervisory, if this pertains to you, that there are 2 different types of grievances as far as activities. One, grievances that pertain to offenders, and then the other one that pertain to staff. Again, the glossary will provide exact definitions of each of those 2 different types of activities, but I just wanted to acknowledge the differences between those 2. Okay. And then once you have indicated or checked which activity that you are providing documentation on, you click next. And then for 3 specific activities, there will be additional options that you can provide. And this only pertains to if you actually, for example, you're documenting information about assessments. Well, if you click that on the previous page, on this page, you'll indicate which type of assessment that you completed and that you're providing information on in the completion of this form. So here we have an exhaustive list of all the assessments that are made available to staff that they would complete in any given day work, or a week or a month. And then the other 2 types of activities that would require these additional options to be selected are data entry and case transfer. So let me talk a little bit about those. So again, here are the comprehensive list of assessments that are available to staff. And so, and you may ask, okay, why is it important? Why can't we just check assessments and that be sufficient enough for purpose of this study? Well, what we want to know, and of course what the DOC leadership wants to know, and I would imagine it would be important information for everyone, is maybe the time required to complete each of these different types of assessments. On average, I'm sure you already know, and maybe through the training that you received in learning how to administer each of these assessments, if they pertain to you, you will see that, on average, it takes 45 minutes to complete this particular assessment, 60 minutes versus another one, maybe 15 minutes for a short end screener type tool. Well, the data are going to be able to support that, and across different types of offenders, their risk level, risk and needs level, and supervision level, etc. So that'll allow us to be very specific in the details of the data across these different types of activities. And the same thing applies to the data entry. Anecdotally, it may say, well, it takes a lot longer when we go to document this type of data into Monitor versus the other type of data. So this will allow us through the data to be able to provide that information as well. So you'll select one of these as well if you, again, check data entry as an activity that you're documenting. And then the other one is transfer type. Now, as you'll note on this screen, it's very important that this does not, this particular activity does not include interstate compact. You'll note that when you receive the documentation this week, the glossary with all the activity, activity glossary, an interstate compact is in itself a separate activity. And so this pertains to those 3 different scenarios of case transfer. So if an offender is moving from a DOC institution to a field office, that would be one, or between agents in the same office or across offices. So again, think of it that these are transfers that occur within the state across different levels. So just want to really differentiate and acknowledge that distinction. Okay, so once you have identified, at this point you've checked off the specific activity that you're documenting, and then if it pertains to one of these 3 activities, you're providing that additional information, and then you'll click next, and then we have some additional details for that activity. Essentially, any people or persons involved in completing the activity, the method in which the activity was completed, and the place, where it occurred. So that, again, additional details in the activities that we'll be able to show through the data. So on this screen, you'll see the list of persons that you can indicate that were involved in the activity. Now, with this one, you can check multiple boxes, because obviously within some activities, it may involve multiple people. So, and then if it was an activity, you'll notice the very last option at the bottom, if it didn't involve any persons at all, then you would check not applicable in that regard. So if it was something that you just completed on your own, think of it in terms of maybe writing a court report or something to do with an activity that's completed on your computer, for example. That would be a valid response there. And then on this screen, you'll see the options for method as well as place. And again, you can check multiple options here for either one of those scenarios. So things to just bring to your attention quickly under method, whether you're using a cell phone or landline, it's all the same thing in terms of a voice call. So as the method, you indicate there, face-to-face, email, computer, the distinctions there. Postal mail, if you're using that as a method to complete the activity, text, and so be texting with your phone or through some type of text messaging service. And then video conference. So those would be a comprehensive list of all methods that you could complete any activity. And then at the bottom there, a place. So again, multiple options can be a check there. And if there is, basically we have an other option there, and that's other community location. So if it's some type of location within the community that's not necessarily specifically listed here, then you would check that box. Okay, so once you provided those details, the next, once you click next on the form, you'll come across the last section here. And so on your screen here, we're going to be interested in, obviously, the time, right? This is the key aspect of the whole completion of this form, is the amount of time it takes you to complete the activity. Now, you'll notice that the amount of time is separated into 3 areas. The travel, so if there's travel involved in completing the activity. Waiting, so for example, let's say you go to a court hearing and you have to wait 30 minutes to an hour, if not longer, before you're actually engaging in the specific activity, then you would document that time there. And then, of course, the amount of time it takes for you to actually complete the activity. Now, you'll notice it on this form at the top, it states that we would like the time in minutes, not hours. So please translate that information into minutes. So we want to, again, allows us to be very precise in the average amount of time in minutes that it takes to complete one activity to another. Okay. And then at the bottom, you'll see the outcome, and you'll choose one or the other, whether you actually had enough time to complete the activity or you needed more time for various different reasons. Those reasons aren't necessarily, we're not asking you to specifically state those, but on the flip side of that, we are asking you to identify challenges, perceived challenges. So you'll see on this screen a comprehensive list of all challenges that may be in your way to be able to complete an activity. And quite frankly, even if you completed an activity, you may still have perceived challenges in doing so. So one common one that comes to mind could be, you're meeting with an offender to come do. Maybe it's just a check-in. Maybe it's an assessment. Maybe it's you're working on a case plan or some specific goal. And surprisingly, the client or offender may be uncooperative to some extent. So even though you completed the activity, you may have perceived that as a challenge in doing so. So again, this is information that, because I'm sure you share with your colleagues and supervisor and everything that if you just had more time, if this wasn't an issue for you, to be able to complete everything that you wanted to or you needed to. So this will allow us to be able to actually see if those kind of anecdotes are supported by the data during this 5-week period. And then, of course, if you did not perceive any challenge at all, then you would just click on the box None there at the top and proceed to completing the form. And then at the bottom, you'll see it says Submit, and you'll be done. Now, at this point, you're able to have the option to edit your response. So you could click on that link there shown on the screen, and that'll take you back to the beginning of the form, and you just go through it. So maybe you thought, oh, I want to double check something, or you felt like that you didn't put enough time in one area as you're completing the form. So you can have that. And then if you're at the time submitting multiple forms to document multiple activities, you have the option here to submit another response. So that way it quickly just takes you back to the beginning of a form, a blank form, for you then to complete again. So you don't have to go find the link again and click on it and take you back there. So it helps hopefully expedite the process for our documentation. Okay? Now, a few things to remember. We encourage you to enter data actively, certainly within 24 hours in which activity is completed. So it's going to be up to you individually to determine how you want to do that. And so that's why we encourage you to go ahead and once you get access to the form, get used to the form, familiarize yourself, see it should only take you, if you have all the information available to you, which I believe the leadership of the advisory committee has developed a hard copy form that is kind of a cheat sheet that you can use if you want to just document how you're spending your time in any given day. And so when you go to actually document and complete these forms, it'll all be right there for you, and you can do that. So you may choose to do that at the beginning of your workday, throughout your workday, or at the end. However works best for you, but we strongly encourage you to do that on an active basis. And we will be conducting data checks throughout the study, and so we'll be doing that in coordination with the advisory committee and the leadership team there to ensure that it looks like data activities are being documented on a consistent basis as well as correctly. So, and the other thing you'll notice that when we were going through the form, that other is not an option. And that's based on past experiences in doing these types of studies with other agencies. What it does, if we allow other, even whether it's for, you feel like we didn't have an activity that was on the list, so you checked other and then typed in that specific activity or some other part of detail related to an activity. What it does is it can compromise the overall data, and it can make data analysis very difficult. And so the efforts that we've undertaken with the advisory committee in recent months was to develop mutually exclusive, exhaustive lists for all of these different questions. So there was not a need for other. But for some reason, we still have time to make changes to the form. As you begin individually using it over the next week, let us know, or let your contacts at DOC know about making those changes, so we can get that going before October 21st. And then you'll note there about the time study period, starting October 21st and then ending November 22nd, so 5 consecutive weeks. That'll end us about a week before the Thanksgiving holiday. This is one of the best, hopefully the best times of the calendar year to do this type of study. We understand it's going to be a huge time commitment, and it's a bit painstaking at times, but in the end, the level of data that your agency will be able to get in return will be useful for years to come in making decisions around a number of areas. Staffing, reallocation of responsibilities or activities to different staff, and we can even be able to make those decisions on an office level. That's precise. So I'll stop there. And Megan we have any pertinent questions at the time that we can answer now, or should we wait?
The law question: do you log time? I asked yesterday. Do you log the time it takes to complete the form?
No, because the Google Forms will be able to provide the timestamp. So each time that you go in and complete the form, it'll automatically be provided. So we won't need you to document that. That's actually one of the perks to Google Forms, is because in previous studies we have asked participants to indicate, like one of the activities, for example, would be time study documentation. So allow us to be able to track how long it takes, but we won't need that for this one. Okay, Megan's going to now walk us through actually how to complete. So it's going to be a live demonstration of completing the form. So we've broken it up in screenshots step by step. So now we'll actually be going through it. So we'll go ahead and pull that up.
Okay. So, right.
Okay. Go ahead, Megan.
All right. So we're going to go through a couple of examples. So Nathan just clicked on the link. It brought us to that first page. And now we're going to go start with the date. So I'm going to fill out something I did this morning. So October 9th. Nathan will put in my fake study ID. We'll hit next. All right. So the first example we're going to deal with is an intake with a new client. So I'm going to put in the individual's DOC ID number. Very specific. And for an intake, there might be several distinct activities that are happening. Each of those activities are going to need to be input individually. So I'm going to start with the assessment. Okay. We're going to scroll on down and hit next. All right. So there's multiple assessments that this individual might need, but for right now, we're just doing their initial assessment, which is the compass. This is an individual with a felony and more than a year on probation. So I click that, hit next. Okay. People involved, that's just going to be me and the offender. I'm going to scroll on down. They came into my office, so it's face-to-face, and the place is office. Time spent. There's 0 travel because they're coming to me. They were, however, about 15 minutes late. But completing The assessment took about 60 minutes. Okay, we did complete the activity. And challenges, waiting on others. All right, we're going to hit submit. Great. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and enter something that I did the night before. So we're going to put in submit another response, hit next. The date is going to be 10/8 because it was last night. I took notes, and I'm going to enter my study ID again. All right, so the particular activity we're going to focus on is going to be a group activity. So there will not be an ID number, but we're going to hit NA, saying that it's not out. And this was a group drug test. Now, we're working on this with DOC to potentially be able to document how many people were tested during one of these group tests or other group activities. That's not part of the current form. We will let you guys know if that's able to change. But for right now, I click drug alcohol testing, and I go down and submit.
And one thing before we proceed here that I did not acknowledge is I did mention that there was about 3 or 4 activities that may involve a group of offenders when you complete those. And again, you don't have to provide the offender ID, but you'll notice on the form that that in parentheses next to each activity that relates to, that it states. For example, here with drug alcohol testing, if a group UA testing is done, no offender DOC ID is necessary. So that's why we put NA there. And the other ones that would pertain to would be cognitive thinking, and then what was the other one? Coordination with service providers and agency partners. And I believe there was a 4th one that we have not finally fully confirmed yet, but we certainly will and let you know accordingly. But, yeah. Okay, Megan?
Yeah, so with these types of group activities, we're not expecting an individual submission for every single person. We are allowed to just submit it as the group. So hit group drug UA testing. I'm going to scroll down, hit next. No assessments, no data entry, no transfer. So nothing on this page. All right, people involved, that's going to be group. We're not going to hit anything else there. No one else was involved. Method is face-to-face, and that's going to be done in the office. I'm going to hit next. All right, no travel time because it's in office. We're going to assume that there's a line of people, so there's no just waiting on somebody to show up. So that's 0. Total activity time will be 3 hours, so that's going to be 180 minutes. The activity was completed. Challenges, a number of things to come up here, but we're gonna say language cultural issues. We're gonna assume that one person came in who maybe spoke Spanish or another language, and we didn't have a translator on site. All right, and then we're gonna hit submit. Okay, and that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Megan. Let's take it back now to our screen here.
Yeah. So the next steps. Why is it doing that?
Hold on a second. More technical issues. There we go.
All right. So next steps after this. As Nathan mentioned earlier, we're going to be sending you guys individualized emails. Probably sometime this week. That email is going to include a reference guide. It's likely going to include a recording of this webinar for reference as well. And we're going to send you guys your individualized study ID. Again, just to reinforce, please do not share that ID number with anyone that is specific to you. We also encourage you guys, it'll have a link to the form. We encourage you guys to take some time in the next week to become familiar with the form before everything goes live. Just note that there might be a couple of changes before we go live based on feedback. We will inform you all of any changes that are made to the form before it launches.
And yeah, as I stated earlier, and as Megan just mentioned, you will be provided access by DOC staff here following this training session to the form. So you can go ahead and begin familiarizing yourself with it. So look for that email as well. Now, we'll go ahead and answer any other questions. Well, here's my contact information. So if you have any questions that come up as it relates to completing this form or any other aspect of the study, feel free to contact me directly, and then we'll address it. But Travis, do we have any other questions?
First, we need to, Tony wants us to let them know that if multiple agents are involved in the group activity, they each log their own time.
Yes.
So two of you guys are doing, the UA night, you would each log your own time separately. And then the next question we have is, in your intake example, if you did more than just the intake, we will need to go back in and add all those in separately, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So like if you did a compass assessment and also an IDA assessment, that would be 2 entries, yes.
Right. And the paperwork for that intake, creating the initial file, that is a separate option as well. So you would need to file that separately.
Can home visits be entered in groups?
Well, I can't imagine, no, because they would be, I think a scenario came up yesterday where you're doing home visits for another agent. You may not necessarily have the offender ID.
So I think to specify, if you're doing multiple home visits at a time, what is ideal is that you're logging each individual home visit and the travel time to get between each of those. So if you're taking like a 4-hour period to do any number of different home visits, you'll log the travel time and the actual time for the first one. Then you'll log the travel time between point B to point C, and how much time the actual visit took. So we do encourage you guys to log those individually, so we know exactly how much time you're spending traveling between different locations.
They want to know if they can access the time study device from their mobile devices.
That would be, I would imagine you could. I mean, this is a form that's web-based, so it's just a matter of clicking the link, and then it redirects you and opens it up through your web browser. So unless you have some type of security issue with if your phone is work issued, and there's some type of security or firewall issue, then we can double check that. But we'll check with leadership and advisory committee.
I think our understanding is that you all use Google Forms pretty often for your work, and so this will function in the exact same way as any other Google form that you're using.
They want to know, what do we do if there are multiple offenders in one residence, I'm assuming for a home visit?
Well, that's a good question. It's not something that hasn't come up yet. I would have to get more context of what that looks like. Where is this location? Is it an offender's home, one home, or is it some other type of facility where there's multiple offenders
Like he clarified a little bit, at a sober living house.
Okay, so some type of, and you're meeting and checking with all of them. I think that is one that is a type of activity that could fall into the group. You can just log it out as one activity, but I'll have to double check that. It'll be listed on the form itself.
Another question, how do they want us to have phone calls after hours recorded?
Yeah, the same way.
Yeah, the same as any other phone call during work hours, because we're not asking you guys what time any of this occurred. If you're taking a phone call, we want that recorded, regardless of the time of day.
And I believe that there, under the clerical category, there's a phone call activity. So. Have any other questions you guys need answered, or is there going to be this is a question for leadership. Is there going to be overtime authorized to accommodate this study?
Yeah, that would be a question for leadership. We'll do, we're continuing to be open until we actually start the time study to any way that we can make completing this form and just documenting your time as easy as possible, because we understand it's cumbersome, it can be painstaking, but so from our standpoint, we certainly want to reduce the burden as much as possible. Did we get an answer to that?
Yeah, Tony responded and said that OT will be authorized, and that's from Tony Garber, just sent that to me. So everyone knows. I'm sure you'll have to go through leadership to get it approved or whatever your guys' process is, but Tony says yes, it will be authorized. Another few questions here. Will all time spent separately on voicemails need to be separate entries? Oh, that's a good question. So like if he has 7 voicemails, he's going through them all. That's a good question, Gary.
Yeah, again, those would be, to me, those
7
would.
is low.
Okay, when you have 35 voicemails to go through.
Yeah, I think that would be one of those. To me, it would make sense just to go ahead and identify that as a group activity. If you have that many. So again, we will clarify that with the advisory committee and confirm how to proceed with you.
That's kind of the sober living question again. Would you log it as a group for offenders who all live in a sober living together?
Yeah, it's the same question. Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. Let's see if we actually.
Yeah, it sounds like we have a couple of things that we'll need to clarify with leadership, which is fine. We'll make sure that that's communicated to you guys when we get some clarification.
Any other questions before we close out, or you guys need to think about everything for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, after today, I'm sure maybe other questions will come up. Yeah, what you're doing, these are all great. This is all great immediate feedback and great questions, some of which we received yesterday with the other group. So as things come up and you digest this information more, and then you get the materials and read through them, familiarize yourself with the form, simply just, feel free to get in touch with us or other DOC leadership, and we'll address those concerns accordingly.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you guys so much. Like we said before, this will be recorded and will be sent to you all along with the reference packet.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.